Welcome to the Ultrahuman experience. This session is free for you for the complete experience. Please download the Ultrahuman app.
Hello, my name is Jennifer. Tonight, let's dive into the blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean and experience a world that is unlike anything we've ever known. The ocean has a cool, healing effect and provides inner peace and silence. Let's clear our mind and let go of everything from our day. Imagine yourself on a beach. Ahead, before you, spreads the clear blue waters. You hear the ocean waves crashing against the shore, and you find yourself walking into the water. The sand underneath your feet is warm, wet, and crunchy. Soon you are by the edge of the water. Breathe in deeply and smell the ocean air. The water covers your feet, and you walk further in. It reaches up to your knees, and soon you are chest deep in the ocean. It surrounds you, making you feel happy and free. You see a young turtle eagerly swimming up to you, as if she wants to talk to you and tell you her story. As you bend down to hear her, you find yourself transported into her world. This is what she says. When I first slid into the cool waters of the Atlantic Ocean, it felt like heaven, an infinite stretch of clear, pristine blue. Sunlight streamed through the surface of the water, bathing me in its warmth. I surfaced to take a deep breath of air. The boat, filled with humans from the aquarium, bobbed on the water, causing small ripples to form, which pushed me away gently. The humans on the boat waved goodbye, and I could see that a few had their heads bent in prayer as they wished me well. My name is Yoshi. I am a young female loggerhead turtle. The earliest memories I have as a child are of waking up to bright lights in a clean room while humans eagerly peered and poked at me. I remember that I had a dull pain on my back, which healed over time. They then put me in a large tank in an aquarium. 3 of the walls were covered in blue tiles, and the 4th wall was made of glass. Curious human children would come and stare at me through the glass. The floor of the aquarium was covered with soft, white sand. Gray, brown, and yellow-colored smooth pebbles and small rocks were scattered on the floor. Many plants with dark green long leaves were planted in the sand. A few snails had made their home in the plants. I was fed well. The humans pampered me and gushed over me, but I was always lonely. And after a few years, I began to get restless. A new feeling slowly formed inside me, a yearning. For what? I dreamed of endless blue waters, of swimming beyond 4 walls, through vast expanses of water. I dreamed of sandy beaches and of palm trees swaying in the moonlight. Perhaps the humans sensed my restlessness, but about a year ago, their attitude towards me suddenly changed. Until then, they would call me to the surface of my tank whenever they wanted to feed me, and they would drop food into the tank, usually pieces of fresh fish or pellets made from crab meat. But now, they began to make me work for my food. A human would get into the tank with me and swim around with my food, making me swim from one end of the tank to the other before they gave it to me. Sometimes they would put live squid, my favorite snack, into my tank instead of the dried pellets. I would have to swim around and catch the squid by myself and eat it. Slowly, all the swimming around to catch my food began to make the muscles in my flippers strong. Little did I know that they were training me for something important. And then came the day of freedom. Freedom. The word has a nice ring to it, but to actually feel it is even better. The salty tang of the ocean breeze and the cool, deep blue waters were like a dream. I never imagined that I would have a life beyond the walls of the aquarium. But there I was, in the vastness of the ocean, endless possibilities stretching out before me. I was free. I heard the distant whir of the motorboat that came to drop me, moving away, set free somewhere off the coast of South Africa. I paddled slowly with my large, powerful flippers. Each stroke took me a good 8 feet, and instead of hitting a wall and turning back like I had done all my life, I can go on and on. The feeling of being able to let myself go overwhelmed me as I began to swim with a steady rhythm. Push, peek above the water, take a deep breath, push, dive into the water, push again. I heard a distant whistle, followed by clicks and grunts. Out of the endless stretch of blue ahead of me emerged wait, what were they? Large and graceful, fish-like creatures surrounded me. They had long snouts, flippers similar to mine, a fin on their backs, and a powerful tail. They were black and white in color and looked like small orcas. One of them, slightly smaller than the others, swam right up to me and did a loop around me. She told me that her name was Carol and said that she was excited to meet someone new. I mumbled back shyly. I hadn't ever made a friend before and wasn't sure what I should say. She clicked and whistled around me, and sensing that I was hesitating, began to chatter about herself and her family. She told me that she and her family were Benguela dolphins, not fish or small orca like I had assumed they were. Carol was easy to talk to, and soon she introduced me to her family. They greeted me cheerfully and told me they were delighted to meet such a beautiful loggerhead. I blushed at first, but soon felt so comfortable that I joined them as they swam across the ocean. Carol told me that she and her family were taking a cruise up the Benguela Current, which runs along the west coast of the continent of Africa. They wanted to spend the winter in the warm waters surrounding the Canary Islands. It had been their annual holiday spot for many years now. The dolphins invited me to go along with them. I had no particular plans of my own and was eager to explore the ocean, and so I agreed. Soon we arrived at the Benguela Current. The current is a large column of water that flows horizontally across the still, open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It is much like a river on land, except that the current cuts a line across the ocean in a particular direction. Carol showed me how to slip into the current and angle my flippers so that I could drift on the water current effortlessly, with just an occasional paddle to push me to the surface for a breath of air. The dolphins also needed to breathe, and so they stayed near the surface of the water, which made things easier for me. And they, too, loved flying fish, squid, and soft sea snails, which are some of my favorite foods. Between listening to Carol's enthusiastic chattering and playing with her family, I hardly noticed the time fly by. One evening, Carol was more excited than usual. She told me that we were nearing the territory of James the Explorer. When I asked her to explain, she smiled mischievously and swam away. The family began to talk about James, and before I could ask them to explain, I heard an unearthly melody, a distant whistle, followed by a deep hum. The sounds rushed through the water, reverberating through my bones and filling my heart with joy. As I looked around to find the source of the song, I noticed a huge shadow emerging from the depths of the sea. A large, knobbly head came into view, followed by the most magnificent pair of flippers I had ever seen. His chin had multiple jowls, dotted with limpets and barnacles that had made their home there. Several suckerfish trailed from his chin, looking like a braided beard. His body had the streamlined shape of a fish, but he was massive, larger than any fish I had ever seen. His tail was muscular and so powerful that when he swam past us to leap out of the water, we could barely feel the pull of the mighty Benguela current. He gracefully surfaced to exhale deeply, a spout of water gushing like a fountain from the nostrils on his head. Then, in a deep, resonant voice, he began to talk with the elders of Carol's family. Carol told me that James was a humpback whale who had been wandering the waters of the Atlantic for years in search of shipwrecks. When he found one, he would examine it for clues that would help him learn more about the species that walked on two legs and lived on land. I stared open-mouthed, absorbing the sight of the graceful creature, and tried to imagine his life in the ocean. I was shaken out of my awe when the Benguela tugged at me again. James the explorer gradually disappeared back into the depths of the ocean, and we resumed our cruise along the current. Our next pit stop was in the coastal waters off Namibia. We slipped out of the current and made our way towards shallow water in search of refreshment. The white sands of the beach stretched on to merge with the yellow sands of the great desert inland. The shallow waters were dotted with boats carrying tourists, and there were many humans snorkeling in the water. Many of them turned toward us, pointed their cameras at us, and clicked away in a frenzy. Carol and her family weren't used to humans, and so were curious and began to play around the boats. I had spent enough time around them at the aquarium, and so decided to explore the surrounding areas. But just as I was swimming away smoothly, a surge of water pushed me off my path. I turned around to see a strange fish flipping his tail and peering at me crossly. He was as large as a dolphin, but was flat, and looked like a vertical slice swimming through the water. He had two fins, one protruding above him and one below, unlike mine, which were on my sides. He had an eye on either side of his body, and he spoke to me in profile rather than facing me directly. His tail was short and flat, and was like a semicircle attached to the end of his body. The tail, in turn, had a series of semicircular bumps on its outer edge. I politely waved my flipper at him in greeting, but he seemed annoyed to see me there. From the way he was trying to push me away, by flapping his fins and creating small surges of water, I gathered that he was very territorial and didn't want me in his waters. What an odd creature, I thought to myself. Carol told me that he was a sunfish, locally called the mola mola. They were the local celebrities that the humans came to see, and the presence of a pod of dolphins with a loggerhead was making them feel like they had to compete for attention. He didn't have to worry, since Carol's family decided to leave soon, and we all headed back to the Benguela. We had not had time to sample the local delicacies, and so the family decided that our next pit stop would be at the Congo estuary, off the coast of Angola. The waters there teemed with a variety of fish that would make for a grand feast. You see, feeding on flying fish is all right for a while, but soon you begin to get tired of it. Carol told me that we might also meet other turtles like me. That sounded exciting, and so I began to concentrate on swimming fast to keep up with the pod of swift dolphins. Before long, we slipped out of the Benguela again. This time, the waters around us were slightly cloudy and turbid from the silt that flowed into the ocean with the waters of the mighty Congo River. And just like the elders of Carol's family had said, the waters were teeming with all kinds of delicacies. I crunched my way through a variety of crabs, fish, and tiny snails. I tasted my first clam, and the oysters were gourmet class. As the dolphin family was preparing to leave, I realized that this was the perfect holiday spot for me. The beaches were calm, and there was a seagrass bed near the coast where I could play amidst seahorses and manatees, and where food was in abundance. Carol and her family were sad to say goodbye to me, but they were glad that I had found a place that I liked. I spent many peaceful days at the Congo estuary, much of it in the company of Tallulah, a manatee who had come to feed on the seagrass there. I thought I was content, but then I began to dream again of other places. I dreamed of sandy beaches and palm trees swaying in the moonlight. I dreamed of other turtles whom I could call my own family. The yearning I used to have at the aquarium took hold of me, and I became restless again. One day, as I was swimming around the estuary, I saw a huge turtle approach me. He did not look anything like me at all. His body was teardrop shaped, and he had powerful front flippers. Where I had a hard and smooth carapace, he had a rigid, leathery back. There was an air of ancient wisdom about him. I was finally going to meet another turtle. I swam towards him eagerly and looped around him several times to show him my excitement. Speaking in a deep baritone, he asked me who I was. I introduced myself and proceeded to tell him the tale of my life. Sir Francis, as I later learnt was his name, listened to me with rapt attention. He gazed at me so calmly and deeply that I almost felt like he was peering into my soul. Soon, I was telling him about my dreams and the yearnings that had made me restless. He told me that because I had grown up isolated, without the company of other turtles, I hadn't had a chance to learn about my own species, our culture, and our way of life. He said that he would teach me about the turtle's way of life, and that this would help fulfill the yearning that I had felt for so long. Sir Francis was a saint and had given up worldly pleasures to settle in the peaceful waters of Angola and pass the rest of his life in meditation and contemplation. He told me that all sea turtles have a powerful homing instinct. In the wild, turtles hatch from eggs on a beach in one part of the world, crawl out of their shells, and into the ocean as babies. They then spend most of their lives exploring the vast ocean. But much later in their lives, when they are ready to have a family of their own, they return to the same beach where they were born. As I listened to Sir Francis's words, I began to think of my own origins. Although my earliest memory was of waking up amidst humans, perhaps I had been born in the wild. Perhaps I had a real home somewhere and a family to which I belonged. But how could I find the beach when I had lived with humans most of my life? I didn't even know where to begin. When I asked Sir Francis this, he told me to focus on my instincts and said that everything I needed to know was to be found within me. He told me to meditate and let my yearning fill me. Then, he said, the deep-rooted homing instinct within me would naturally guide me home. From that day on, I began to meditate and prepare my body for a long journey. I started connecting with my inner instincts and let them direct my actions. Then, one day, when I was ready, I set off swimming in the vastness of the ocean. My instincts drew me back to the South African coast. I braved the waters of the Benguela alone, going against the current this time. Soon, swimming became a mode of meditation for me. Push, peek above the water, take a deep breath. Push, dive into the water. Push again. I focused my energy on swimming and did not stray from my intended course. As I neared the place where I had been released into the sea by the humans, I felt an urge to explore the shallow waters. My time with the dolphins had taught me that coastal waters were the most vibrant places in the oceans. As I approached the shallow waters, under me, the spread of white sand at the bottom of the sea was replaced by massive corals. Soon, the wide plateau of a coral reef came into view ahead of me. It was like nothing I had ever seen. There were butterfly fish in a dazzling range of colors, bright and mesmerizing. Some were yellow with blue streaks on their bodies. Some were white with blue streaks. Some jet black with white splotches. Black-colored surgeonfish with orange flecks rested in a sheltered alcove. Sleek yellow goatfish with proud mustaches fiddled with sand in search of food. Black, orange, and yellow sea cucumbers lazed on stretches of flat sand. Every nook and cranny of the reef was filled with sea urchins, waving their dark thorns and Christmas tree worms, showing off their blue, yellow, pink, and orange feather-like whorls. A bannerfish strutted past me, his long dorsal fin trailing behind him. Cobalt blue starfish lay sprawled over rigid coral domes. Large, spiny, brownish-orange starfish crunched on snails that had pretty patterns on their shells. Cuttlefish changed colors and, like disco dancers, bobbed this way and that with the pull of the water. Even the food was colorful here. A grumpy moray eel with leopard-like markings emerged from her hole to inspect her neighbors. Giant clams with bright blue and green lips sat lazing in crevices. A peacock-colored mantis shrimp zipped from coral to coral, while his slower, less colored cousins looked on in envy. And of course, against all of this was the magnificent coral reef itself. From staghorn coral to the massive coral, and from pillar coral to meadows of sea pen and sea fans, there was a breathtaking variety that I had never seen before. The spell was broken when I heard a splash and found myself suddenly surrounded by 5 human scuba divers who were descending into the water from a boat anchored nearby. They grew excited when they saw me and began to approach me. It seemed as if they wanted to pet me. I had had enough of humans during my life at the aquarium, and eager to escape their clutches, I began looking for a way out when a blue moon parrotfish with a beak very much like mine hailed me from a nearby gully amidst the reef. I swam towards her, and together we entered the gully, passing a large sea anemone tended by a clownfish. Once we were well hidden from the scuba divers, the parrotfish turned towards me and introduced herself as Ruth. It turned out that she was the resident hippie of the reef. We hit it off immediately, united by our dislike for divers. She said that she would take me around, and since I had algae and barnacles starting to form crusty layers on my back, that our first stop would be the local spa. I followed her to a sandy spot surrounded by corals, where a number of tiny black and blue colored cleaner wrasse, along with pale orange and white spotted cleaner shrimp, were busy cleaning the dead skin, worms, algae, and other accumulated filth off many customers. As they rushed to us and began pampering us, Ruth told me about life at the reef. It seemed like a hot spot for those who sought out parties and fun. In fact, it had become so popular that the great white sharks in the region had formed a mafia and were currently controlling the area, throwing their weight around to make sure things happened the way they wanted them to. While the thought of relaxing at the reef was an appealing one, my inner instinct told me that I should travel on. But I wasn't entirely sure what to do, and so decided to seek out other turtles for advice. Perhaps they would be able to guide me, just as Sir Francis had. Ruth told me that there were, indeed, other turtles at the reef. And when we were done at the spa, she took me to meet one. Cassie was a young turtle, like me, and had the most beautiful carapace I had ever seen. It was heart-shaped and olive green, with hexagonal patterns. Ruth introduced me to her, and to my delight, she said that she was very happy to meet another young turtle. Cassie told me that she too had the same yearning and was learning to hone in on her homing instinct. I was thrilled to meet someone who had the same dreams as I did, since we got along so well with each other Cassie and I decided to travel together. We thanked and bid farewell to Ruth, who had been crunching on some coral nearby as we talked. She wished us success with a wave of her fin, then disappeared into the colorful crowds of the reef. Cassie and I made our way out of the reef and swam towards the open waters to the south of the coast. Soon, we had entered the cold waters of the Southern Ocean. Cassie told me that the Antarctic circumpolar current would take us east to the Indian Ocean, and suggested that we cruise on the current rather than spend extra energy to swim all the way to where we were going. Since I had just swum against the Benguela for weeks, I was more than ready to be carried restfully along a current. We found the current, fondly called the ACC by the locals who pointed us towards it. When we entered it, I found that it was colder and faster than the Benguela. The feeling of being swept along in it gave me a rush and energized me. We cruised through the vast expanse of the deep blue Southern Ocean. The wonders we witnessed here were different from those of the Atlantic. The days were bright, and as we flowed with the current, we saw shoals of dolphins, majestic whales, migrating fish, and manta rays that seemed to fly past us. The nights were magical, with bioluminescent algae that lit up the waters surrounding the ACC, as if 1,000 stars had descended into the ocean. They twinkled a soft blue-green, and left sparkling swirls of light when we waved our flippers. Soon, as Cassie and I traveled meditatively together, we found that our homing instincts were aligning together. Weeks flew, and we entered the southern Indian Ocean. We wanted to travel north from there and made our way out of the ACC. The locals pointed us towards the West Australian current that would take us in the direction we wanted to go. This current was also cool, but calmer than the ACC and easier to drift on. In these waters, too, the nights glittered with the magic of bioluminescent creatures. One night, we passed a pad of sleeping blue whales that had suspended themselves vertically in the water. They looked like massive pillars, arranged in a circle, and a great feeling of awe took hold of me. Seeing the whale family together increased our desire to find our own families. As we neared the northwest Australian coast, we slipped out of the West Australian current and made our way towards the shore of Pilbara. We began to meet more of our species: green turtles, hawksbill, and leatherbacks, all congregating after their travels around the world to find their families and exchange experiences. One day, as we drew closer to Pilbara, Cassie saw a group of olive ridley turtles and decided to join them. After we bid farewell to each other, I felt my yearning more deeply and decided to move towards the shore. Pale, rugged reefs began to emerge from the water, and I saw more fish around me as I drew closer to the shore. Just as I was beginning to think of how much I missed Cassie, I saw a movement from the corner of my eye. A flipper like mine had just disappeared beyond the fringe of the reef. I swam along towards the fringe of the reef, and there discovered that the reef fell away to reveal a large expanse of sand-bottomed water. In that expanse, I saw with wonder that a large group of loggerhead turtles were gathered together. I hesitated to go towards them. Would I be accepted, given where I had come from and what I had been through? Would they shun me, or would they love me? I decided that there was no way to find out but to go and meet them. As I slowly approached them, many of them began to notice me. To my relief, I saw that they seemed friendly and peaceful. They welcomed me with warmth and heard my story in awe. Together, we made our way towards the nearby beach with its pristine sand and palm trees swaying in the breeze. The yearning within me eased at the beautiful sight before us. The wet sand felt warm against my flippers and my belly, and sent a tingling feeling to my heart. I had arrived at my home. After 22 years of dreaming about it, and 2 years of wandering the oceans, I was where I belonged. I was finally at peace. Good night and sweet dreams.